we are. My name is Chris Bryan. I'm one of the two co-chairs, along with Tom Seary, of the Steering Committee of Peace Action of Wisconsin. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we are on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homeland along the southwest shores of Michigami, North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. The Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet here. The people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, Mohican, Brothertown, and other Native nations remain. So even though we're on Zoom again instead of in person, we have a very nice program planned for tonight. I just want to quickly go through our agenda so you know where we're going. We're going to start with a keynote address, followed by a short discussion. Then we'll have a presentation of the Peacemaker of the Year award to someone who's 105 years old, which is inspiring in and of itself. We'll then have a song or two and a poem to lift our spirits even more. We'll get to our 4-point business meeting, and then we're going to have a short video on the case of Julian Assange, and then we'll have time for any new business or announcements that people want to bring before the meeting, and we hope that we'll be wrapping up by 8:30. One more thing before we start. I really want to encourage everybody, please, when you're not speaking, make sure that you're muted on your computer. I see most of you are right now. You don't want to be that one person whose private conversation with your spouse or yelling at your cat is what's interfering with everybody else's ability to follow the speaker. So please, most of you will not be speaking most of the time. Stay muted until you are called on to speak. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our very hardworking office manager, who's going to introduce our guest speaker, Pam Richard.
Thank you, Christy. Yes, our speaker is David Swanson, Executive Director and co-founder of World Beyond War. He's also a campaign coordinator for RootsAction.org and a radio host of Talk Nation Radio. His books include War is a Lie. He is a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and he was awarded the 2018 Peace Prize. And World Beyond War is the 2021 recipient of the Peace Prize by the U.S. Peace Memorial Foundation. David Swanson.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I wonder if somebody would be kind enough and capable of making me a co-host so that I could use a little PowerPoint. If not, I can look at it and talk from it, but you all won't see it.
We're pretty lenient, so we let everybody share screens. But,
oh, really?
Really?
Oh, never mind.
I can make you a co-host. Just
I don't need to be a co-host. I just need to share screen.
Okay, you're good.
And stop echoing, I guess. So I'm shooting for 15 minutes of this and 15 minutes of questions. So I'm starting a little 15-minute timer here and see what I can get through. I wanted to call attention to the fact that the New York Times has now reported twice in recent weeks on 2 of hundreds and hundreds of bombings by the United States military that have killed 5 to 6 million people in the past 20 years. And we need to encourage and applaud the courage and the resolve and the work of the whistleblowers, the sources, named and unnamed, the reporters, but to ask for a third story and a fourth and a fifth and hundreds more, because people are not understanding and are in fact being misled by this reporting, that these are not aberrations, that these are in fact what make up these wars. They are one-sided slaughters of people from the air, and they are not something else where these are flukes to be corrected and called out as as aberrations. And we know this thanks to whistleblowers like Daniel Hale and others, thanks to reporting on the ground by independent investigative reporters outside of the United States in these countries. And most people do not know it because of the overwhelming silence and omission. And because of the way these stories are reported, including the outrageous claims that it's okay to blow up a crowd of 80 people if you mislabel them or most of them non-civilian, or you claim to be acting in self-defense thousands of miles from your home. So there's a lot to be glad for in recent days and to demand more from. This is the context. This is, on the screen, a list of U.S. wars, large and small, in the past 20 years, and U.S. facilitated and supported coup attempts in the past 20 years. This has become an epidemic. And if we look at the best estimates of deaths, with no certainty, these are approximations, but the very best estimates of the dead from these wars, we're looking at a figure of 5.9 million people, with the U.S. troops in these wars making up 0.1% of that, despite making up, the vast majority of the media coverage in the United States, so that people actually believe that these are two-sided wars, that the U.S. troops are a significant portion of the casualties. What else has been accomplished through these wars? Why is there a problem with the whole enterprise, the entire institution of war? Well, the rule of law has been eroded. Governments have been heavily militarized. Local police have been heavily militarized. The damage to the natural environment is extreme. Terrorism has been increased, not decreased. Racism and bigotry have been promoted. The trillions and trillions of dollars spent could have done worlds of good, far more good than the harm they did. It's just, there's no upside. I think this was being mentioned before we started here. Joe Biden is stepping into the shoes of Donald Trump as weapons dealer to Saudi Arabia for the war on Yemen. And while Congress seems to think it's just fine to have a war on Yemen as long as Trump isn't president anymore and has stopped trying to end it with the War Powers Resolution, the weapons dealing continues, the war continues, the U.S. military's role in the war continues, and it shouldn't be okay with us. This is the context, and this is a book I wrote a while back. The United States arms, trains, and/or funds 48 of the 50 most oppressive governments on earth, taking those 50 from a list funded by the U.S. government. And of course, there are others not on that list that the U.S. government also funds and arms and trains. So this is the pattern. And it's not just the wars, but also the threats of more wars and the propaganda we're getting about China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. I'm starting to echo a bit. I hope you can hear me okay. And even the true bits, even the things that are true that are horrible about these other countries, governments don't make it legal or sane to be threatening more wars. Yeah, I'm definitely echoing. The talk of a rule-based order, the talk of the United States as some sort of leader of democracy flies in the face of the fact that the US government is the leading war maker, owns virtually all of the foreign military bases around the world, spends as much on militarism as roughly the rest of the world put together, is the top weapons dealer to the world, has US made weapons on both sides of almost every war, is among the very top holdouts on human rights treaties and disarmament treaties, the top opponent of the International Criminal Court and the use of international law, etc. So when Professor Alfred McCoy from the University of Wisconsin-Madison says we need to be worried about China violating human rights as a major threat to the pristine rule-based order upheld by the United States, it's not because the problem is not that China doesn't abuse human rights. It's that there is no rule-based order of human rights compliant imperial leadership to be violated. It doesn't exist. This is a picture from Milwaukee of a billboard that tells the story of really the deadliest weapon, which is the pocketbook. The 3% that 3% of just U.S. military spending could end starvation on Earth, and you can say similarly incredible things about 5% and 10% and 15%, and what could be done for the environment of the Earth, the climate of the Earth. This is the real story, the spending. And here are the dollars of just the Pentagon budget over recent years with the bipartisan harmony in Congress commitment of an even faster increase in the coming decade, each and every year. Somehow they just know that after 9 more years of this, in the 10th year, they will need even more, despite all the good it will supposedly do. And then, of course, there is another $500 billion that's not in the Pentagon budget, that's in other agencies and departments and care for veterans and debt for past wars and so forth. So this is an incredible amount of money. And so this pretense that that social spending, that a minimal sort of social spending bill like the Build Back Better bill before they turned it into a bill for tax cuts for gazillionaires was a huge expense, is just outrageous when you're talking about over $20 trillion spent in the past 20 years on wars and war preparations. So we really need to go after the whole institution, not a particular war, not a particular weapon, not a particular atrocity, but the whole institution of war. If people believe the mythology around war, it's hard to get them to reduce military spending. Why wouldn't you want as much of it as possible? And ending wars to fight better wars, getting rid of the weapons that don't work in order to invest in the weapons that work better. You know, this is not what we need. The money, the diversion of the resources kills more than all the wars put together. So we need to debunk all of the myths in our educational efforts. And this is a section of the worldbeyondwar.org website where you can click on these different myths for the debunking of them. And of course, when you talk about ending war in the United States, pretty much all anybody wants to talk about is World War II. And so I did write this book called Leaving World War II Behind. And this is the table of contents, the things that I think need to be re-understood about the myths surrounding World War II. This is another section of the worldbeyondwar.org website looking at the various arguments for ending war, including threats, what it does to the natural environment, et cetera, et cetera. And these are also ways to build coalitions across issues because we have allies in those who want to fight poverty or want to go after bigotry or want to protect the environment, et cetera. Nonviolence denial is as dangerous as climate denial. I mean, the talk of resorting to violence is as much a slap in the face to the facts and evidence as talk about climate collapse not happening. And so either we're for facts and science or we're not. We really need to go local. one reason is because you can achieve successes much more quickly and easily, and people build on those successes. Another reason is that you can build those alliances across issues. You know, the Sierra Club will never go anywhere near peace, but your local chapter of the Sierra Club will in a heartbeat, no question, no problem. And so, you know, as we build these alliances in numerous localities, we create the pressure to have them at the national and global levels as well. We also need to go global. We have more power against this global weapons industry when we're working globally across borders in alliances, people at a military base, people at the capital of the country creating the military base, et cetera. And building a global identity in the process changes how we think about war and peace and what we're about. In terms of education, World Beyond War tries to provide a lot of resources, including lots of upcoming book clubs and online courses, etc. One type of campaign that's proved very useful and effective and successful is divesting local institutions and state and national and global institutions and individuals, but especially local governments, taking public dollars out of weapons and out of fossil fuels at the same time, and educating about the interlocking nature of those two areas in the process. It can be very effective and successful. Creating a culture of peace. Awards is something on here, and I think there's a wonderful award about to happen this evening. That's a terrific example of creating a culture of peace. Books, calendars, events, history, holidays, monuments, etc. All of this is very important. The activism is the encouragement. You know, I think we need to stop obsessing with pessimism or optimism and enjoy and find fulfillment in the work, in the activism, and also overcome this this epidemic of what I call Pinkerism, this belief coming from Steven Pinker and others that war is simply going away on its own. Well, it isn't going away, and it's not going to go away on its own. We need to make it go away, or it will make us go away. And I did it with 1 minute to spare, so maybe we can have 16 minutes of questions.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Yeah, we want to.
Yeah. Yeah,
Really good.
We have a question here on the floor.
yeah, I don't have a question. I listened to Bernie Sanders' speech before the Senate today regarding the defense funding bill, and it was fantastic. He went deeply into the area of healthcare and education rather than using money to buy arms. And he wants to decrease the defense funding bill, and so does Biden. Biden, I think, wants to decrease it by 15%, and Bernie's trying to decrease it by 25%. We should get a hold of that speech today and distribute it. It was great. Nobody interrupted him. There's so much else going on. But that speech today should be distributed.
Thank you, Eugene.
Just to respond briefly to that, I have not seen it, and that's wonderful. And I will find it, and assuming I like it, as I expect, spread it around everywhere. That's great to know. It's also worth noting that the House recently passed a very similar bill, and not one single member of the entire House of Representatives did what Bernie has done, and that is just announced that they're going to vote no. A handful of them did vote no in the end, once they're sure it's going to pass and they're not going to create any waves, but not a single damn one of them said, even 30 seconds beforehand, I'm going to vote no and want others to vote no. The defense, quote unquote, defense spending reduction caucus effectively didn't exist, didn't do anything, not a thing. And so even this, phony commitment to not do the infrastructure bill unless we get the social spending bill, which I think 6 of them held the line on that. You didn't even have the pretense that any of them were going to. There was just nothing, no resistance. Also, sadly, you are, I think, absolutely and importantly wrong about Joe Biden. I wish you were right. You're not. Joe Biden took Trump's military spending and increased it, demanded more than that. Then the House added on to that. And you had this line from the progressives in the House objecting to an increase from the House Armed Services Committee, and yet supporting the increase from the White House and pretending that wasn't an increase at all. And now you have a third increase coming from a gang of senators. And so each time people object to the increase, but they sort of blur over the fact that there have already been increases, and that what we need, as Bernie alone is saying in the US Capitol, is a significant decrease in the military spending.
Roger, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. I've done a good bit of, legislative kind of lobbying work on specific issues of, militarism and peace. And I, share the vision that you present of, a world without war. And, I'm appalled by all of the US being kind of the chief warmonger in the world. And I can put those two together. You can have a vision, but then pragmatically work on specific issues. But when you're approaching groups, you mentioned, for example, a divestment campaign about, investing in weapons.
Yeah, I don't know.
Excuse me 1 second, Roger. I hate to interrupt, but somebody is not muted and is talking and it's interrupting the speaker. So some of you came on after my admonition to please keep yourself muted except when you are being recognized to speak. You should be on mute right now. If you want to speak, the best way to get our attention is to go to your reactions button at the bottom of your screen, click on it, and there's a hand that you can raise that will show up on your screen. Jim Carpenter's hand is up right now. That tells the moderators that you are waiting to speak. So that's the way you should do it, but please mute if you're not speaking. Thank you. Sorry, Roger, go back.
Okay, well, I'll try to make this briefer. The example you said, you could speak to groups about divesting from weapons production. And when approaching a group like that, there might be people who might respond and saying, well, we shouldn't, be investing in these weapons because they're wasteful and we're already spending more on weapons in other countries, that they might be able to, resonate with that message, but presenting a message that all war totally is wrong and that the United States is the chief, warmonger in the world, which I think is true. They wouldn't be ready to hear or accept that. So what kind of messaging do you do with what people? I mean, that's a broad question, but I'm just trying to sort through this all in my mind as
Well, it depends. I think there is always a great deal of truth in the let's go to where people are and carefully nudge them a little bit in the right direction and not say anything that might scare them off. I think the general trend is too much in that direction. I think more, it's not that that's never true and very, very useful. It's just that more often than not, we err on that side rather than being upfront and honest with people. And when you're organizing activism, you don't actually need people to all agree on ideology and visions and worldview if they agree on the action. I mean, when we got our local city council to ban drones, we had right-wing groups with their NRA hats who don't want to be spied on in their home, but just couldn't give a rat's behind who gets blown up thousands of miles from here. They just couldn't possibly care less. And we had people who want to abolish war, who don't like the idea of blowing men, women, and children up with robot airplanes. And we had them in the same coalition because they agreed on demanding the same thing. And so you're absolutely right. If you want to get a city council to take public money out of weapons, you want to appeal to those city council members with arguments that will move them. But really, arguments don't move politicians much at all. If you pack the room and everybody stands up and says they agree, and you're in the media and you're in the newspaper and you're on the sidewalks and you're pressuring them and you've got candidates on your side who are running against them in the next election, this is what moves them, right? And so, in fact, we got our local city council in my city to divest the public operating budget from weapons because of public pressure, not because they agreed with our view of the world. And we failed to get the same city to divest the pension funds, the retirement funds from weapons, because we didn't have any public control over those people. We could preach to them night and day, but we couldn't vote them out. It wasn't a democratic institution. And maybe you could have done an argument better than the one I did. I certainly failed miserably with the pension fund people, but it's a balance. You gotta figure out, does it make more sense with this guy to suggest a slightly smaller military budget because wars are good, but we're just spending a teeny bit too much? Or to explain that the wars are counterproductive, and so we really need to start scaling back the spending, which is going to be more effective. And sometimes people can spot honesty too, as well as coherence in an argument. So, it depends.
Thank you.
Can I call on people?
I'm sorry, I muted myself. I'm sorry. Jim Carpenter is next. Then we've got Brian, then Samir, then Tom Rodman. So go ahead, Jim.
So David, can you say something about the famine in Afghanistan and what we should do about it?
Hi, Jim, and I can try without a great deal of expertise. I think the United States should stop trying to starve the people of Afghanistan because it's pissed off. I think it's reprehensible, criminal, immoral, and catastrophic. I think denying funds to a country in desperate need exposes the lie that anything you've been doing in that country for the past decades has been intended to benefit anyone. When you've got done blowing up men, women, and children, and the New York Times covered the very last teeny little bit of it because it happened in the capital city while the country was in the news, and now you're trying to starve people. It's just absolutely reprehensible, and it's criminal. And these sanctions that the United States imposes on dozens of countries around the world outside of the United Nations, just lawless, piratical behavior. It's illegal. It's a violation of the Geneva Conventions. It's punishment of a population, not a criminal, and it's immoral, and it damn well ought to end. And you could have taken the trillions of dollars spent on these wars and made every single person in Afghanistan rich. You could have just given them homes and jobs and resources. And that sounds crazy to anybody in Washington, D.C., but you could have done it for less and had a pile of money left over. Why is that crazy?
You're so right. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Yes. So you listed the wars that we're currently involved in right now. Is that true? There was 6 of them.
Not to my memory, but you could be right, depending on how you count them. I did have a slide listing a lot more wars than that was intended to be wars over the past 20 years or so.
Right.
I don't know if that's where that's coming from.
Oh, so those aren't the ones that we're currently involved in right now?
Well, I like to use we to mean you and me and we good people on this call who are not involved in any wars, thank goodness. But the U.S. military and special forces and drones from the CIA, depending on how you look at it, are involved in ongoing bombing campaigns and threats thereof in at least several countries, certainly Syria, certainly Yemen with Saudi Arabia, certainly Iraq, and a number of countries in Afghanistan, including Somalia and Niger. And, it depends how you look at it, but the claim of the US military is to be able to strike anywhere. And the war on Afghanistan, we think is ended and we hope is ended, but they claim the right to go on bombing Afghanistan as they see fit.
Okay, yeah. I just think it's real important that people know how many wars we're involved in right now. I mean, back in the Vietnam War days, there was one war and you saw it on the news every night, and but now we're involved in more wars and you hardly know that anything is going on.
Well, and when they secretly took it into Laos and Cambodia, it was a big freaking deal. People noticed that and cared. Now, I mean, this is a problem even the Roman Empire never had. They could count their wars. In the United States, it's hard now to keep track of them.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Next, I've got Samir.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Good seeing you. Well, I mean, in terms of numbers of war.
Samir, you got muted again.
Okay. Okay, so quickly, I mean, in terms of numbers of wars, I'm assuming David would agree. I mean, there are many, many, many more. I was born in Lebanon. There is a war in Lebanon by the United States. I mean, you may not hear about it, but people are starving and and there aren't enough medicines and stuff like that. And then you add Venezuela, Cuba, and all of these other countries where there is a hybrid war or sanctions that is killing people by the thousands, if not, and starving millions, and on and on. And Ethiopia now is starting up. They're starting up on Ethiopia. So it's much harder to count wars, and depending on how we define war, because the CIA and others are also involved in wars, and U.S. ambassadors. The U.S. ambassador in Lebanon is a horrible, horrible person that is a complete, just like they do in other countries. But David, couple of quick comments and see what you would say. First of all, in terms of peace movement, how are we going to build? I mean, you said not optimistic or pessimistic, but a realistic question, I think. How are we going to build a peace movement if every few years Democrats come up with something like Russiagate? You mentioned how the New York Times came back to correct some of the war stories, but the Russiagate is a huge one, which completely disempowered many in the liberal or peace movement, because we got worried about Russia way more than what the United States is doing, and now that's falling apart. The other quick comment that I want to mention, and I bring it up in these type of events, is we always talk about others, the millions of victims. But the other thing that we need to also, I think, put within our sight as helping us in the anti-war movement in the US are the resistances of all the citizens in all of these countries that are targeted by the US. So from Lebanon to Iraq, to Cubans, to Venezuelans, these should be also part of our story and narrative to say their resistance is helping us here. The US did not leave Iraq because it was winning the war. The only reason they left, I mean, they didn't really leave, is because they were losing the war. And they were losing in Afghanistan. And if they lose in Venezuela and Cuba because of the Cubans and the Venezuelan, that for us should be something we put forward, and we actually respect all of these people and tell their stories of resistance at a very, very hard price. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, there's a pile of topics I could go for 8 hours on. I'll try to do 60 seconds, and maybe you can email me and we can discuss further. Obviously, there are ways to define war, a place where 1,000 or more people die annually directly from the violence that would exclude other equally horrible, even more deadly things from the definition of that particular word. I agree that of the disaster that Russiagate and similar things have been, and the problem of people falling for such scams, I think it's good the extent to which that is belatedly falling apart. There was a good column a couple days ago in the New York Times admitting to the disaster of much of that so-called research. I think it's the reason why they are so wary and restrained in their claims about Havana syndrome and other things without evidence is because finally some people are coming around. I think that we absolutely need to work with and encourage and collaborate with the resistance to imperialism and lawlessness and the weapons industry and the war industry around the world. And we need to, where is the United Nations when it's the United States blowing up crowds of civilians? Where is the BDS movement? Where is the International Criminal Court? Where are the courts of the world when it's the United States? And obviously, for goodness sake, we need to respect every single human being on Earth. But the implication that was almost there that I should support and cheer for violent resistance to U.S. violence, no, sorry, ain't gonna do it. Not going to go and demand that the people being bombed by the government of the country where I live do what I tell them. They have no reason to listen to me, and they certainly won't. But when they ask me my opinion of what should be done, as people do sometimes in some countries that the United States military is bombing, I tell them to look at the evidence of what works best, of the incredible success of nonviolent campaigns versus violent campaigns. And so I can't encourage resorting to a tool that's less useful and less likely to succeed. I have to encourage resorting to the most powerful tools available. But that does not actually mean I cheer for the Pentagon. I try to devote my entire life to turning the Pentagon into an ice skating rink and abolishing everything else that's in it.
Okay, we're actually at the end of the time we had allotted for this. We still have 3 people who are wishing to speak. So what does everybody think we should do? Should we take 3 more speakers and say, make it quick, please? Let's do that. So next is Tom Rodman.
Okay, I just want to say, listen to your podcast, half an hour.
Can barely hear you. I heard you really loud for the first 2 seconds.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Just barely, yeah.
Huh, okay. I'll see if I can turn the volume up, but it's weird. The sound was just fine before. Okay.
That's good. That's better. That's good.
Better. Okay. I'm just gonna have to move this. Yeah, it seems like the mic seems to keep creeping downward. I don't know why. And anyhow, maybe I'll cut it to short. Randall Ray, Modern Money Theory. I think you interviewed him, and you also interviewed Colleen Rowley. We came up in the anniversary of 9/11, but Randall Ray is involved in modern monetary theory, and it has to do with how we could shift taxes. So I just and then I wanted to let people know about Scott Horton, because it seems like he's a regular on the War on Terror, and so I don't know if you just want to comment on either Colleen Rowley or Randall Ray. Pass.
Randall Ray is a guy I've just met once very recently as a guest on my radio show, and so I don't know anything more than what's there. I recommend listening to it, of course. But Colleen is a friend and an ally of many years, and an absolutely wonderful person and activist and strategizer and researcher and analyst. And if you're not working with Colleen over there in the Twin Cities, I highly recommend you start.
Thank you. Anne, did you withdraw your hand, or would you still like to speak? Okay, then Philip. Thank you, Anne. Philip Anderson. Philip Anderson, do you want to speak? Going once?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from far northern Wisconsin, and I'm a veteran. And I would like to just have David comment on the hero worship we do with veterans in this country. All of the thank a veteran for your freedom bullshit. All of the putting them on pedestals, and they brought us freedom and they brought us safety, and they protect the American way of life. And it's kind of my opinion that all of this is just the propaganda that allows the next war to happen. And we will never make any progress in this country in trying to reduce military budget or develop a more peaceful foreign policy as long as everyone, including liberal Democrats, repeat this mantra about the veterans being these heroes that brought us freedom. And I just wondered if David would have any comments on that.
Well, it's extremely powerful propaganda because it's meaningless nonsense. And you can say something like support the troops and tell people it's supposed to mean be nice to people who are injured and give them health care and living wage jobs and befriend them and don't spit on them, but actually use it to mean continue and escalate this war, even a war where you poll the active duty troops and the majority of them want it ended immediately. Somehow it's supporting them to continue and escalate it. And so it is dangerous propaganda, and it is a dangerous normalization of militarism to have, special parking places and get first seats on the airplanes and all of this that just saturates the society with war worship. It's, and one of the best groups that turns this around and uses it against the war madness is Veterans for Peace, which I'm glad to be on the advisory board of. And when they invite a member of Veterans for Peace on CNN or MSNBC because they're a veteran, and they assume that they're, down with war, but are willing to comment on some particular outrage. A friend of mine in Veterans for Peace, I remember, was on CNN about urinating on troops in Afghanistan. And once they asked him about that, he just said, look, I don't care about the stupid urinating on troops in Afghanistan, urinating on corpses in Afghanistan. Why are there corpses? What the heck sense does it make to be murdering people? I don't care if you're peeing on them afterwards or not. The problem is war. And then he gave a great, speech on that and was never seen again for the rest of his life on CNN. But somebody else from a veterans group that's for peace, slides through that door and makes use of it. So there's a problem that, so many veterans are destroyed by these wars, and that mass shooters are very disproportionately veterans, even though statistically virtually every veteran is not a mass shooter, of course. But there are, great veterans groups that not only do great work for peace, but it's therapeutic for many of the veteran members to be doing it.
Thank you, David. Obviously, a very, very inspiring and thought-provoking presentation. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to be moving on, but thank you again. It's great to have you here with us. The next point on our agenda is the presentation of the Peacemaker of the Year Award. And to present that award, I'm going to introduce a member of our steering committee, Mary Lon. Mary?
Hi. Hello,
Hi.
everybody. Oh, I just went off. I can't see anything. Just a minute. Anyway, Joan Robertson, I'm happy to announce, is our recipient. She was born just before the 19th Amendment was ratified. And this she's the daughter of Annette Roberts, an outspoken pacifist and suffragette who worked toward world peace and democracy and diplomacy. Joan's daughter, Annette, is named after her grandmother, and she is here tonight also. Joan marched with Jane Addams. Joan Robertson marched with Jane Addams down in Chicago when Jane Addams was leading the women's suffrage there. And she joined her when she led the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which is a very wonderful group. Robertson herself is now 105. Are you here? Yes, there you are. Okay. She's 105 and is retired from attending and hosting meetings. She now contributes to the work of Peace Action Wisconsin through her daughter, who's next to her, down there on the right, third one down, fourth one down. And the Joan, so she works through the Annette J. Roberts and Joan R. Robertson Fund for World Peace. They both do. She helped establish a model UN program and a United Nations Schools in Learning program because of her, it was her mother's idea, and Annette has been very instrumental in that and has been very successful. Joan is dedicated to peace, disarmament, ending militarism, and equality in the United States and all over the world. So thank you so much, Joan. Thank you. And here is,
All right, Joan, love you.
this is your award, if you can read it. And I will give that to Annette.
Mary? Wait, okay.
Hold it up a little higher. Yeah,
There, how's
there we
that?
go.
Okay,
Magic.
Mary.
Now, there's
thank-
a lot more that Mrs. Robertson has done, and if she would like to say anything, that would be wonderful. If she doesn't want to say anything, that's fine too.
Mary, I would love to say a word or two. I thank all of you, the Board of Peace Action. And I'd like to say that I have been a supporter of Peace Action as well as other organizations. One of my main concerns is the support for the United Nations. And Annette has carried on so well in trying to help the young model UN people establish their names and learning and having good speakers come to speak to them every anniversary of the United Nations. This year will be, the coming up of 22 will be the 77th year of the United Nations. But going back to Peace Action, I remember after the Hiroshima fiasco, horrible thing, that Peace Action became quite valuable, but it was called Zero. I think it was called Ground Zero in the original founding of it. And then later on, it turned into the Peace Action of the United States. And we of course, belong to Peace Action Wisconsin, which has done such a great job But I won't carry on any longer than this to say that I can remember during the Vietnam War where another Mother for Peace was established, and Peace Action was very active in that respect too. But thank you all very, very much for this wonderful honor that you've given to me, and I shall treasure it and think about it every day. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Joan.
Thank you,
And
Joan,
Annette.
from all of us at Peace Action of Wisconsin. Thank you so much. All right, next on the agenda, we've all been missing live music, and this is sort of live. It's live. We're not in the same room with Harvey, but we're so fortunate to have amongst us Peace Action's own member and local musician, Harvey Taylor, who's going to entertain us with some songs. Harvey, you ready? Getting there? You're muted, Pam.
Is okay? Or what do you,
Well, in front of the,
so aim at the laptop? Well, back, so back. So more or less. You can be happy, Suzanne, in a minute. Likewise, like right here. Are we
we're
sort of
ready.
tuned in?
Yes.
Well, as we tune in to the spirit of gratitude approaching Thanksgiving, of course, I just want to acknowledge my personal immense gratitude at being a long-term member of the Peace Action community, the Peace Action family, and here to share a song to honor all my fellow Peace Action folks who are doing our best to change the world. So, if I could change the world, I certainly would. I'd make it more just and peaceful if I could. I'd make sure everybody had enough and nobody had too much. If I could change the world, if I could change the world, I definitely would. I'd make it more just and peaceful if I could. Babies would grow up being taken care of. Every one of them would know nothing but love. If I could change the world, if I could change the world, I surely would. I'd make it more just and peaceful if I could. Violence and war would be things of the past. We'd know how to communicate at long last. If I could change the world, if I could change the world, believe me, I would. I'd make it more just and peaceful if I only could. Mother Earth, our home, would be treated right. Humanity would appreciate her day and night. If I could change the world, you know I would. I'd make it more just and peaceful, but possibly could. Well, by myself, I can't do very much, but together we can do enough. Yes, together we can change the world.
Hey, great.
Do you have another one for us, or is that it? Do you have another one, Harvey, or are you finished?
That's good. That's good.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, really wonderful. We have one more piece of art to inspire us, and that is we're very fortunate in Peace Action to also have our own poet. Suzanne Rosenblatt shares her poetry and performance art with many groups and at many places in the Milwaukee area. She has read for Peace Action Wisconsin innumerable times. She is Earth Poet, reading for Earth Day celebrations, for food pantry benefits at Woodland Pattern Books, and much more. So now I'd like to present Suzanne Rosenblatt.
Oh, is that me over there?
Yes, it is. There you are.
Okay, well, this is a poem in progress. So this is definitely the first time I've read it for people other than myself or my writers group. X marks the spot. When I first learned we had to have a lockdown, be locked up, even if living alone, get used to feeling at home, but only in my own, I thought, oh, I'll turn on public radio, WUWM. It's like going to college all over again, although in a pandemic, I have no idea if and when it'll end. Still, there are endless things to learn when life takes a turn for the worse. I gotta make it an opportunity instead of a curse. Listen to Radio Lab, This American Life, on the media reveal all sorts of programs that make me feel even more aware of the outside world, of screens, of streaming, of lies, of scheming, while I'm ensconced in my familiar inner world. I love the newscasts that come with lessons in history and hidden brain, there to explain the pathways of the brain, to shed light on our biggest mystery. The important thing, it seems to me, is to keep that hidden spot busy, the spot no one else can see. I can't even see my own. No wonder I might sometimes feel alone, despite hearing the radio, seeing TV news, constantly swamped by email, snail mail, social media, interviews, while my hidden spot tries to figure out what life on Earth is all about, midst constant brainwave chatter. What ripples most matter? I never feel ignored, never get bored. I marvel that we all walk the same ground, even when locked down.
That hidden spot keeps moving all day, always in an unexpected way. Each thought leads to the next, then the next, the next, the next. Has the world changed for the better? Are people happier with all the innovation, prolific misinformation, constant transformation? Then the next, then X, constant chaos, unending war, no cocoon of safety. What's it all for? Then the next, then X. X marks the spot. But what is X? It's not an X-ray, that I realize, not a snapshot of the hidden spot behind the eyes. It's the quest, the question, the replies, always a surprise. Never quite know where the next thought will go, then the next. Global fleeing, scurrying, searching. Did our forebears make a mistake? Was capitalism the wrong choice to make? Does it encourage competition, accumulation, greed with no limits, instead of love for thy neighbor, and empathy if thy neighbor has less? Yes. Something went astray to make the world such a mess. Capitalism, cap it all, cap it all, cap it all. But there is no cap at all, no limit. Then the next, then X, marking the spot, the hot spot. Okay, so sometimes it's not so hot. Racism, sexism, greed, need, everything's unequal. What in the world has happened to people? Pandemic, climate change, mass extinction, dictators, demagogues, insurrection. The global jigsaw of disasters fits together with perfection. Yes, it's clear there's a global connection. Take a nap, and when you wake, write a rap. What really matters? What doesn't? What really was? What wasn't? What's the real cause of this or that problem? Once we know them, can we solve them? Can we consolidate global energies of love and hate? Wait, I think I spotted the spot. I hope it's not too late. If the richest billionaires tally their worth, they'd see they're able to save the earth. If we tax their assets instead of their income, that would amount to an incredible sum to fund the global range of steps to take to conquer climate change and keep the globe awake. Was this just a dream? No, it's Elizabeth Warren's taxing scheme. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you, Suzanne. All righty, now that we've been fortified with this little artistic interlude, we're going to move on to the next part of our program, which is the business portion. And to start that off, I'm going to introduce my co-chair on the Peace Action Steering Committee, Tom Seary. Tom?
Yes, good to be with you. And I want to talk about some of the organizational side of Peace Action. One of the things that we've been talking about at the steering committee is the need to continue people who have a lot of experience with the organization, and in addition to bringing in new people. But there are a limit within the organizational structure of Peace Action. At some point along the line, there was an establishment of a 3-year term for anybody to continue on the steering committee. And this has been a concern for some of us who've been on and want to continue to provide the service to Peace Action. So one of the things that it's in the bylaws that there has to be a 3-year term limit. And we've suggested, the steering committee suggests that we take that out and allow people to serve on the steering committee as long as they're willing and able. Probably have some limits on that as well as time goes on, but that's the motion before the body right now. There's a motion to remove this limit on terms. So I want to put that forward as a motion. I don't know if there's anybody who opposes that motion or feels that it's necessary to continue the 3-year term limit. But at first I would, I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that or has any concern about that removal of that issue. And so I guess I want to leave it right now as an option if anybody wants to speak to that or oppose the motion to get rid of the 3-year term limit. So is there anybody who wants to speak on that? Anybody who has concern about that issue? I suppose Pam or somebody could see if somebody wants to raise their hand and talk about that issue.
We have both Mary Lon and Brian with their hands raised.
Oh,
Tom.
yeah, I'm sorry. Mary Lon, I can see. Mary, take your mute off, Mary.
Good idea. Okay. Yeah, I think at this point it's a good thing to do because of the pandemic and the lack of activity physically of so many people and the complicated situation we're in right now. I would suggest that we include in the resolution that we bring it up again in 3 years. In other words, everybody would be automatically reelected and maybe new people would come in. But in 3 years, we should look at it again. That's the only suggestion I have. And I think that would be, something we could talk about again. But I feel that if we didn't put that in the resolution, that we could forget about it altogether. And, that we really shouldn't be on the board forever, I don't think.
Okay, is there any objection to that addition to the resolution? Is there any objection to
Well, Brian has his hand up.
Oh,
Brian Funzel wants to speak.
Okay, let me. Yeah, Brian, did you want to add something?
Okay, there. Yeah, I think there should be some limits because it's possible for someone to be on the board that's a negative influence, but 3 years is way too short. And I would say maybe 6-year term limit. Or what number do you, whatever number, I think it'd be good to put a number in there as far as a term limit. 10 years or 6 years or some number,
Okay.
I want to speak, Tom.
Sure.
Just in response to that. First of all, there are procedures for removing a steering committee member if one person would be causing a specific problem. If someone's causing harm to the organization, the rest of the steering committee can remove that member at any time. We don't have to wait for any term to be up. The other thing is there's nothing to stop any member of Peace Action any year from proposing that we reinstate term limits. The fact of the matter is that there were some very specific conflicts going on at the time that was added to the bylaws, and we thought it would be protective. But in the meantime, we have this pandemic, and as Mary said, we're just not getting the big participation in things. We're not getting together, and it's just really hard to be recruiting new people to the steering committee. Certainly, we'd like to see that happening, and we do have some new members coming on, but we kind of need some of the members who would be past that term limit right now. We thought the easiest thing to do is, at least for now, drop it. And as I said, it can always be moved to reinstate it later.
Okay. And it sounds like Mary Lon was making the suggestion of a 3-year addition to the situation, which just kind of ties in with what Brian was talking about too. 6 years. And that's what Mary was adding to the current term, that 6 years would be enough time for people to actually have been on, and maybe at that point they would be required to move on. Is there any thoughts about that additional to the?
I understood Mary a little differently. I thought she was suggesting that we revisit the issue in 3 years, not that we would extend the terms 3 years. So I'm not sure.
You're right. You're right. It was. I'm just kind of putting together what Mary said and what Brian was saying.
Okay.
And using the 6-year addition. Mary, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I like the way you said that, Tom. We can redecide in 3 years is what I'm thinking. So whatever people want to do is fine with me, but I think we need to put it in the resolution that we don't just wait around and forget about it. I'm afraid we'll forget about it.
Okay. So Brian, is that acceptable that we have a resolution that will bring this up again in 3 years, which would be the 6-year limit that you're talking about?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that, given that amendment to the motion, is there anyone else who has any thoughts or objections to the current direction that this is going in? Is there anyone else who has any concern or objection to the continuation of a 3-year addition to the limits? Third time around, is there anyone who has objection to the change and having an additional 3 years for those people who are currently on the steering committee? If not, if no objection, I think there's a consensus on this, and that's what we're going to do. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, Christy, take it away.
Thanks, everybody. Well, now you've got to do the election, Tom.
Oh, that's right. Okay, a little detail like that. Okay, so the election of people who are on there are people who are on the steering committee. I am again going to want to be on the continuing steering committee, and Chris Brian is also interested as being on. You can see on some of the screens, if they're in front of you, the list of the background of people and some of the involvement they've had. Mine's probably not as long, but I think I kind of, if there's any more that needs to be asked, I can do that. Harry Targ is the third one who's been on. And again, you can see Harry's credentials and the events, what he's involved. Mary Lon has been on, and it continues to be a source of various ideas that she comes up with, as you heard already today. Bruce Ware has been on. Bruce and I were at Children's Court together for a while, and he's been a longtime activist for Jobs for Peace. And Bruce and I really got together on trying to limit the number of guns in our community. Jill Ferguson is a new person on the committee, has been very involved in some of the environmental issues, have been very particularly concerned with the rights of Native Americans, of indigenous people, and have been involved in their concerns. Ann Batiza is a new person on right now, but has been very involved in the issues of Julian Assange and the defense of him in Milwaukee. And she's very involved, again, in looking for broader ways of getting information and clearly relying on people who are involved in it. Eugene Barufkin is a new person. He's been involved in global warming, and you can see some of the other issues limiting the costs of military and increase in military and the tax burden of global warming. So he's been involved in a lot of good actions, and you can see some of his activities that he has been involved in. And finally, Bruce Andrews has long sought to war since he was 16 years old when he was in Vietnam. He's a member of the Socialist Party and has been in very active in the attending the stands for peace that we have every Saturday. So that's the list of people who are going to be on the.
Tom, how about Sean O'Reilly and Chris Chesky?
Sean is not going to be on. I'm blanking here. Sean is been on 3 years and is ready to move on to some other activities. He's very involved in his work at the university. And then Chris is his job is going to, or his work, his family is going to be moving out of Milwaukee for about a year. And so the two of them are not going to be able to be on the committee at this point. So
Okay,
that's kind of with the situation with both of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, or did I get that right? Okay. So those are the list of people who are currently going to be coming up in the coming year, going to be on the steering committee. Is there anyone who has any objection to those people, or is there anyone who would also like to be on the steering committee? If there's anybody else who would like to be on the current steering committee, please raise your hand or let us know. Let me say it a second time. Is there anyone here listening who would like to be on the steering committee as well? We're always open and interested in getting new members, new points of view, new vision of what's going on. Is there a third time? Is there anyone else who would like to be on the steering committee and get involved in really making the decisions for the organization? If not, we'll have the slate of steering committee members be closed, and I would ask if there's anyone who objects to the current slate of steering committee members. Is there anyone who objects to the current slate of steering committee members? Is there anyone who objects to the list of the people who are going to be on the steering committee for the next year? If not, we're in again. Okay, so
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Chris.
thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'll move us along. The next point on the agenda is a finance report from the treasurer, whom we're going to miss so much, Sean O'Reilly. Sean?
Thank you, Christy. I think, Tom, you got us, Chris and I switched, but that's fine. Both of us won't be able to return next year. I'll be traveling around with my family for the year, and then we'll be back in Wisconsin the following year. But it's my honor to present the Peace Action of Wisconsin financial report for this past year. This year, we've begun the process of moving all of our funds from the Associated Bank to Educators Credit Union. And we're nearly complete with the process. We have one more switch that we'll do in January once our final CD is available. So I see some applause, so thank you. We've had a great financial year, all things considered. We operate on a $25,000 budget, and we've stayed within that budget. So that's the good news. The bad news, or not bad news, but the other news is that we are approximately $2,000 short of our fundraising goal for the year. Our hope is to close that $2,000 by year's end, and we'd love your help in doing that. So please be sure to donate what you can. We should have the donate buttons available in all the newsletters, but you could also mail in a check. So please do that. And we're also seeking help with fundraising calls. So we'll provide you with a script and a list of people to call. If you're interested, please contact Pam. Additionally, we've noticed that the interest in mailing parties has, understandably, with the pandemic, dwindled a bit. So despite that, we continue to see a strong impact from our mailings, both from our newsletters and from our fundraising mailings. And as such, we're looking for anyone with expertise in USPS mailing barcodes. So if that's you, or if someone you know has that experience and expertise, please let us know. That'd be really helpful. And so if you do, contact Pam. Then lastly, we are updating our outreach methods. So if you currently receive the paper newsletter and you'd like to switch over to our email, then you can receive the information more timely and save paper. Please let us know and that you'd like to make that switch, and we'll switch you over to our e-newsletter. So again, the e-newsletter includes all the same information of the regular newsletter that you get in paper form, but it has a smaller environmental impact. It's less costly for Peace Action, and it allows more timely information getting to you. So please contact Pam again if you're interested in making the switch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Is there any discussion about his points? Any comments? Otherwise, is there any opposition to accepting his report? If not, thank you, Sean. See why I say we'll miss him so much? We really need those skills that he has. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
The next point on the agenda is to have our steering committee member, Harry Targ, talk about conversations around the Peace Action of Wisconsin mission statement that we've been having. We're not really asking for action, but kind of starting a conversation, and he's going to explain it to you. Harry?
Hi, your steering committee has been discussing the preparation and revision of the Wisconsin Peace Action mission statement. We thought this would be a useful exercise to help us address who we are, what we stand for, and what our vision about of the future. Some of us are interested in adding some words that reflect the diversity of our concerns, such as worker exploitation, racism, sexism, the environment, and rectifying the historic occupation of the land that belonged to Native peoples, including slaughtering many of those people. Of course, the steering committee still remains committed to an end to militarism and war, interventionism in other countries, and supporting conflict resolution in troubled places, and creating a more equitable and self-sustaining world. Over the next year, the steering committee will be inviting comments from the membership on this project, and perhaps at the 2022 annual meeting, we can present a statement for membership discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Does anyone have a comment or question for Harry about this proposal? I think what we really want to do is just make sure that we keep ourselves aware, and all of the people who come to us to support our work aware of how interrelated all of these issues are. And we think maybe being a little more upfront about their interrelatedness would be worthwhile or helpful. So that's that. Let us know. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just want to add, I was impressed with Samir's contribution and our increasing sensitivity to a resistance around the globe, and how we in the main should be in solidarity with that resistance as well.
Great, I agree. Okay, anybody else have a comment on this? All right, then the next thing on the agenda, and we're really getting near the end, is one of our newer members, Ann Batista, who's been working hard on the Julian Assange campaign, has selected a very short video for us to watch to kind of wrap things up. So Ann, are you ready with that?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate Peace Action Wisconsin's support of Julian and all of you who came out to support the efforts on October 22nd and 23rd, the Stand for Assange, the wonderful speakers that we had. It was really, really fantastic. So in preparing this video, I know one person asked about the impact of WikiLeaks. That's what she would prefer to see. And I put a video in the chat where you can access, John Shipton recently was interviewed in Paris, and it's only, anyway, the video is set to start at the proper time. And he talks about at least 4 different impacts of WikiLeaks in bringing justice. But today I want to share with you a video. I put it together. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, I want to share. I presume you can still hear me. So this video is, I actually got permission from Randy Critical, although he told me that these videos are free for anyone to use. But I took a couple of clips. He recently interviewed Niels Meltzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, and Daniel Ellsberg and Angela Richter, a playwright. And I have some clips here from Niels Meltzer. And Niels is not just the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, but he's also a professor of international law at the University of Glasgow and the Human Rights Chair at the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. And here he's going to be describing the impact of the US pursuit of charging Julian Assange, a publisher, with violation of the Espionage Act, that the impact of that on press freedom for generations to come. And this is from season 6, episode 13 of Randy's show, Assange Countdown to Freedom, The Case of Assange, Anatomy of a Show Trial. So with that, and by the way, the whole episode with the interview of Ellsberg and everybody else is in the chat. So I'm going to open up my video player, and here we go.
So look, to those people out there that are watching this that still think that Julian Assange is a rapist and a hacker and a traitor and a narcissist, look, I don't blame you. It's not your fault. You have been deceived. And if you believe you're not being deceived, that's normal, because otherwise it wouldn't be deception. So just look through the smoke screen. Ask people like Randy Critical, like Daniel Ellsberg, like Angela Richter, read my book and find out the truth, because it is worth it. It's about your rights and the rights of your children. So it really is about the larger implications of this case. As many of you know, I didn't want to get into the case initially because I was very much poisoned by that negative narrative that had been spread about Julian Assange. And me too, I was not able to see actually through the smokescreen in the beginning. But when I visited him in prison and I saw how states were reacting to my interventions, which I just drew objective conclusions from the findings of 2 of the most experienced, specialized forensic doctors, specialized in examining, torture victims, and from his living conditions. I asked those modern democracies to now apply their obligations or implement their obligations under the Anti-Torture Convention and investigate this case. And when I saw that the blatant kind of sabotage of my investigation by those states, and we're not talking about the usual worst case, worst suspects of human rights violations. We're talking about Sweden, we're talking about Britain. That also kind of showed that the Assange case is just the tip of the iceberg. And what's important is that it allows us to see through the keyhole into that parallel universe where the rule of law and democracy has already been largely undermined and neutralized. Our institutions no longer work. If you can invade a country based on lies, which is one of the supreme crimes since the foundations of the United Nations. If you can torture hundreds of people, expose thousands to abuse, murder people, and no one is being prosecuted except whistleblowers and journalists. What I always say in that simple sentence, what we're witnessing is that it becomes a crime to tell the truth, and that the criminals are no longer prosecuted, but those that tell the truth are being prosecuted. I don't want to leave a world to my children where it has become a crime to tell the truth. That's to me is the definition of a tyranny. And what we see is, this is not just about the US. Yes, the US is the most powerful country right now in the world, and there's this Espionage Act, but the UK is learning fast. They interpret their Official Secrets Act just in the same way. They refused to investigate their own torture, participation in the torture program. They introduced legislation, domestic legislation in the UK to try to prevent prosecution of their own soldiers for war crimes and torture and so on. And now, just 2 weeks ago, Sweden, which was the safe haven for the free press in the world, which is why WikiLeaks wanted to establish itself in 2010 there, and which also triggered that whole story. Sweden, the Swedish government proposed to Parliament in Sweden that it should be criminalized, become a crime in Swedish law to disclose classified information, not that would threaten national security, but that only would be prejudicial to the relations of Sweden with another country or an international organization. That is now a firm proposal in Swedish Parliament by the Swedish government since 2 weeks, that this should become a crime. So what we see is a proliferation of this secrecy. And so, they will not stop with prosecuting, Assange. This is the beginning of it all. And so if we don't, stop it here and now, and if we're not firm with this, we will have lost more than a battle. We'll have lost a whole war.
So, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So Niels Meltzer, the person you heard speaking, had determined that Julian Assange had been psychologically tortured by, as he put it in an article in Republic, and I will put that reference also into the chat, by the mobbing of democracies and the mobbing in collaboration with the media. But he has written a book. It's currently in German, called The Trial of Julian Assange, A Story of Persecution. It's in German. It will come out in English on February 8th. And I would like to ask everyone here to call Boswell Books, call Daniel Golden, the owner of Boswell Books, and ask him if you can get that book through Boswell Books. So you're not getting it through Amazon, but you're also alerting him there is a need to also please ask him if he would set up a Zoom with Niels Meltzer to discuss his book. I think this would be a wonderful way to spread the word about this incredibly important case on press freedom that our media have ignored. So anyway, I'll put a couple more references into the chat, but thank you all very much. And are there any questions, or do we have time for questions?
I think if people want to ask them, they should. I don't know what just happened. I just lost my screen. Are we getting cut out by Zoom or something? Did we go over a time limit?
No, it's fine.
Oh. Why am I seeing launch meeting on my?
It says we're sharing
I've been getting
Gilberto's.
that.
You flip to a different window. Zoom resize makes Windows full size sometimes. and it
Can't hear
does-
you.
I can't seem to do anything with mine.
Gilberto
Sometime-
is sharing his screen.
Who is that?
I saw a message.
What?
There was a message that Gilberto was sharing his screen. I don't know who that is.
Well, you know what? We only have a few minutes probably. So let's just try to forge ahead and ignore this little glitch we have. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Anne? Anne, you want to announce the other event that you're having on January 2nd?
Yes, and I saw the note from Tom about my microphone. I apologize. I hope the sound was okay for you all. Oh, okay.
No, it was
Okay.
good. It was good.
Okay. Yes, so I will put in the chat the previous time that Niels Meltzer spoke at the Unitarian Church, which was January of this year. And now coming up in January at the First Unitarian Church on the Forum, which is by Zoom, 11:10 in the morning is when it starts. On January 2nd, there will be John Kiriakou, who is the only person who went to prison for torture. He's the whistleblower who blew the whistle on the torture program of the Bush administration. And then it was actually carried into Obama. And then also will be Fidel Narvaez, who was the Ecuadorian consul for 6 years, overlapping during Julian's time in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And the two of them will be the guests. That's January 2nd. So right now I'm going to put a couple of more of those references in the chat. And thank you very much for your interest in Julian. Are there any questions? Now I can see everybody. Does anyone have a question? Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, so the challenge I have is that we in the peace movement, I'm down here in Kansas City, part of the local Peace Action affiliate. And we are good at identifying the specific examples of how the government has done this wrong or has done that wrong, but we don't always look at the systemic. Why does the government constantly attack everybody who gets out of line when we promote this concept that we are the what do you call it, the shining light on the hill and all that? And so the only thing I've been able to come up with, and other people probably have a lot more experience because I'm kind of new to the peace movement within the past few years, is that after World War II, we were doing what we call neocolonialism, or what has been termed neocolonialism, that was more of a debt-based, but it was also based on mass murder. I mean, if you look at what we trained people to do through the CIA and through other organizations all throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s in South America, or in the 60s in Indonesia, or even Vietnam, we murdered our troops, and our allies murdered millions and millions of people, which is how we made the capitalist system work. And so now it seems like we have people like Julian Assange or other people who say, hey, this is what the empire does, the empire led by America. And they strike back. And so the question becomes, we're going to see hundreds of these little case examples like Julian Assange, unless we start to see the system that's falling apart, that has been so brutal in the past, that more and more people are standing up to and saying, we're tired of being screwed over by the empire. And I don't really understand a lot of this, and I'm wondering if any of you people could help me understand more of the history about why most Americans, they're either okay with it or they just, I don't understand why so many people don't want to look at the system. They just want to look at the individual, what do you call it? The malfunctions, the glitches in the system.
So if I could just briefly address that, I think the huge problem in this country is that we have a Pravda, but our citizens don't realize it. Even NPR, PBS, our media continually support imperialism and make us feel comfortable about it. And Julian pulled the curtain back on that and exposed all these deaths. And so the government is, trying so hard to silence him. And they did it with WikiLeaks actually exposed the plan against Julian. Stratfor was one of the contractors who was contracted to undermine Julian and WikiLeaks, their reputations, infiltrate them. It's very similar to what was published recently by Yahoo News about Pompeo. Not the killing and the assassination part, but I mean, I'm sure that's been there, but all of the kinds of ways that you undermine organizations. And I think our media is just terrible in this country. And we're finally beginning to realize it. And so the more people can call out the media for normalizing war, the better.
Can I jump in quickly on that question too?
Yes.
This is Samir. As someone who wasn't born in this country, there are some observations that one sees. It's beyond just media. It could be education, media, and all of this. But it's something one sees within liberal, with peace movement. I think there is a virus of American exceptionalism that we even I, as an immigrant, I get infected with eventually. Somehow something says, oh, this is great. We're on the road, the right path. Notice how we give a lot of excuses to the system that's been around for hundreds of years. And we say, but the ideals are there. We're trying to get better, right? Because of the system, the freedom. Whereas when Nicaragua or Cuba, who's had a system for just a few decades, we give them no excuse about moving forward towards a better ideal. So I believe, as someone who practices mindfulness and meditation, it has to do a little bit about what do we really, really, really believe about the establishment of this country, and what we really, really believe what it is about. I think. I mean, look at when we do land acknowledgement. I go around, and initially I was very happy. I was at the UU church and is mentioning, and wow, land acknowledgement. Even in the 90s, we would get up and during Thanksgiving, we would acknowledge that Thanksgiving is not a happy moment for Native Americans. But we never extend this understanding to what colonialism is. I mean, if we're going to acknowledge land was stolen, then we need to talk about Palestine land is stolen. We need to talk about Puerto Rico. We need to talk about Hawaii. We need to talk about all of these where we are stealing lives and resources in Africa. But we simply land acknowledge without extending. Well, why are we acknowledging the land as native land? It's because it was colonized by white Christian Europeans, mainly, a specific type of Christianity, obviously not all Christianity, that wants to take over. And this extends into Zionism, it extends into so many other things that we still have that virus that's going on, but somehow we hope that there is an ideal that we're moving towards. And I don't see it, because every few years we fall for the election cycle and we go along and say, oh, okay, lesser evil, we're getting better, and we're not getting better.
No, we're not. We're not. Thank you, Samir. I want to say one other thing based on what David Swanson said. He talked about in war, you lose the rule of law. And I know that Ray McGovern, former CIA analyst, presidential daily briefer, who's actually become a good friend at this point, he mentioned at the Unitarian Forum, he was also the other guest with Niels, that back in 1980, William Casey made the comment that one of Ray's friends then conveyed to him within the CIA, that we will know we have succeeded. He was head of the CIA when everything that the American people believe is true is false. And I have to say that we have this lawless intelligence agencies. We have lawless intelligence agreements, the Five Eyes, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the UK and us. And I wonder to what extent the lawlessness of the intelligence services drives so many of these things that are outside of observation, outside of oversight, outside of and they have these tremendous powers of surveillance. So I think there are a lot of things to be concerned about. I think if the American people stand up, and the one thing that these people cannot stand is transparency. That's also why they're going after Julian so much. So if we can change that dynamic so that it's not okay to have, imperialistic, endless westward expansion, through the entire globe, to, as Samir was pointing out, to colonize, to, bomb people of color, to treat them as other, to treat ourselves as exceptionalism. I think the media and awareness among, even among people now in groups like Peace Action Wisconsin, they have to become aware of how many lies our media tells us.
Great. Jim, you did have your hand up. Have you withdrawn it, or did you want to comment?
Well, I can talk offline with Ann. I just wanted to know what's going on with Polkan's office, but we can talk offline.
Okay, good, because I actually have one request to make before we sign off, and it's something that has a deadline of tomorrow. So I'd really like to bring it up now, and that is that there is a letter being circulated by some members of Congress, including Representative McGovern and Barbara Lee and some others, asking President Biden, in the name of humanitarianism, to reverse some of the really horrible sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration against Cuba after there'd been some minimal relaxation under Obama. Trump came in and slammed on about 240 more very vicious, severe restrictions on relations with people in the United States. And a lot of people expected President Biden to start to undo some of those just in the name of humanity, since there's this pandemic going on. The Cubans are hungry, they can't get food, they can't get energy sources. And yet, since Joe Biden's been in office, he has done absolutely nothing to reverse any of Trump's savage attacks on Cuba. So there's this letter circulating. Gwen Moore, Mark Polkan are not on it, are not signatories right now. So tomorrow is the deadline that they're trying to use for collecting signatures from Congress people. So this is going to be on our website. If you would please go to it, take the time to contact your member of Congress and ask them to join in the movement to ask Biden to reverse the restrictions on Cuba. So thank you. So is there anything else? Anybody else have something to announce or ask about?
I'm going to try to share the Peace Action highlights again. And okay. take off the big screen and let's just see if it'll work. Whoops. Oh, I think wait, hold it. I got to do this again. I don't think I shared the sound. Yeah, I did. Okay. Okay, let's try to share this.
Strangest dream I've ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw a mighty room all filled with women and men, and the paper they were signing said, we'll never fight again. Last night I had the strangest dream I've ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. And when the papers all were signed and 1,000,000 copies made, they all joined hands and bowed their heads, and grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and guns and swords and uniforms lie scattered on the ground. Last night I had the strangest dream I've ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. Peace, peace will come. Let it begin with me. We need peace. Let it begin with me. My own life is all I can hope to control. Let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come. Let it begin with me, you and me, you and me.
That was great. Thank you for getting that up there, Pam. We wanted to do that earlier. Thank you. Thank you so much to Sue Ruggles for putting that together, and David Drake for providing the soundtrack. It was wonderful. Sue, we're so grateful. Thank you. That's fabulous. And what a great way to end. Unless somebody wants to extend this for another hour, but we're past.
Sorry, I don't know.
We're past time.
You told people to call the Senate, right? Call Baldwin about voting no on NDAA.
Oh,
Did you make that announcement?
Please do.
Yeah. The NDAA is up for voting in the Senate. Could happen as early as Monday. So please call Baldwin, say vote no on the NDAA.
So Baldwin on that, and Gwen Moore on Cuba. Ask her to sign on to the McGovern lead letter regarding Cuba.
Will that be on the website of Peace Action Wisconsin?
I'm not sure if it is yet, but the plan is.
I'll put it on there tomorrow when they get in around 10.
Why don't you just do an email to everybody, Pam?
And please, everyone, contact both senators and your representatives to stop this extradition request and persecution of Julian Assange. We want a free press. We do not want all of our rights to be destroyed, because if a free press goes, They all go. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Anything else? Do we dare say goodnight? Thank you, everybody, for putting up with this format. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
And thank you, Christy, for leading this thing.
Yeah, nice job. Nice job.
And thanks, Christy.
Yes, Christy, thank you.
Right, good night all.
Mhm.
Good night. I'm gonna stop the recording and then the live stream. So stopping recording.
So Jim, do you want to stay on to talk?
Wait. Just so you know, I haven't stopped the live stream, so I'll do that next.
Yeah, and it's fine. If we're together here, we can say something.